This simple beanie is loaded with gorgeous texture and is super easy to make. It uses less than 100 yards and takes an hour or less to make, which is perfect for market prep. It only uses 2 stitches to make this beautiful knit look, and I can't wait to show you how to make it. For a full list of supplies, see the description box below. Before we get started, I wanted to show you that this stitch actually looks better with super bulky or jumbo weight yarns. This is a super bulky size 6. And as you can see, it looks knitted, but it's not too dense. And then this is a jumbo weight. This is the totally tubular yarn from Lion brand, and it looks beautiful. It just looks a lot better. Any smaller size yarns are not going to look as good, so just keep that in mind when you're practicing this stitch or making this hat. For this tutorial, I'm going to use Lion brand's Woolies Thick and Quick. It has 87 yards, and 1 ball should be enough to make this hat. It is a size 6 super bulky weight yarn, and it recommends a 9mm hook, which is what I will be using today. I crochet very loosely, so if you are a tight crocheter, I would go up a size or 2. The color I'm using today is called Moonlight. You are also going to need a tape measure for this tutorial and a stitch marker. To begin, you are going to make a chain in multiples of 2 until it measures the circumference of the wearer's head. So I am going to make a chain of 44 stitches. You can make your chain however long you need it to be. Just keep in mind that it needs to be a multiple of 2. Once I have 44 stitches, I will show you what it should measure. So here I have my 44 stitches, and I'm going to show you right quick. Your chain should measure approximately 20 to 21 inches if you're making an adult-sized hat, give or take. Being very careful to not twist your chain, you're going to go to your first stitch. For this particular pattern, you are not going to slip stitch to join. You are immediately going to be working into the first 2 stitches. And for this hat, I am only going to be working through this loop here of each stitch. I consider that the back loop only of the chain stitch. So you are going to be working through the back loop only of each chain stitch. So I am going to be making a single crochet 2 together through the first 2 stitches. So we are going to start off by decreasing. Now I should have, but I didn't. You should go ahead and put a stitch marker in that stitch. Chain 1. This is what it should look like. You decreased and then you chained 1 to compensate. I've dubbed this the rebound stitch because you're compensating as you go along. So I'm going to decrease over the next 2 stitches, single crochet 2 together. And now I'm going to chain 1 to compensate for that decrease. So I'm actually not going to be changing my stitch count. So over the next 2 stitches, go ahead and single crochet 2 together. And chain 1 to compensate for that decrease. So you're just going to continue doing this over and over until you reach your stitch marker. So here I am at the last 2 stitches. Be sure that you are not going into our very first stitch there, and if you listened, you should have a stitch marker there. So I'm going to decrease over the last 2 stitches. And I'm going to chain 1 to compensate. Now we are going to begin round 2. We are going to continue this stitch pattern, and you are going to be working into the single crochet stitch and the chain 1 space. It is a little bit harder to see the chain 1 space, so you're going to have to be very careful to pull your stitches apart so that you're not single crocheting 2 single crochet stitches together. You want to go into the chain 1 space. If you pull your stitches apart, there should be a vertical bar right there separating the two so that you can see the difference. So here we are going to go into our very first single crochet and pull up a loop, and then we're going to go to our chain 1 space here and pull up another loop. So we are single crocheting 2 together over these 2 stitches. And then you're going to chain 1 to compensate for our decrease. So before we go any further, this particular stitch pattern is worked in the continuous round, so you're going to need your stitch marker. So go ahead and put your stitch marker in the very first single crochet 2 together stitch that you did, not the chain 1 space. So now we're going to continue on in our stitch pattern. We single crochet 2 together, we've got a chain 1, now we're going to single crochet 2 together over the next single crochet and chain 1 space. So pull your stitches apart. It's these 2 areas right here. So here's the single crochet stitch, and here's the chain 1 space. So single crochet 2 together and chain 1 to compensate for our decrease. Single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and chain 1 space. Chain 1. I'm going to show you one more time. Single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and chain 1 space. Chain 1 to compensate. So you're just going to continue doing this over and over until you get to your stitch marker. So here I am at the last decrease. So I'm going to decrease over the last stitch in the last chain 1 space, making sure you don't go into your marked stitch there. Single crochet 2 together and chain 1 to compensate. I'm going to show you how to begin the next round. So we're going to continue in the continuous round. Do not slip stitch to join. Single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and the next space. Now you're going to remove your stitch marker from below and put it in the stitch you just made. That way you can always tell where your rounds begin and end since we are working in the continuous round. Go ahead and chain 1. Now we're going to single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and chain space. Chain 1. Single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and space. Chain 1 to compensate. So just continue repeating this over and over until you reach your stitch marker. So here I am, I'm at the last 2. We're going to single crochet 2 together over the last stitch and space and chain 1 to compensate. So you should see the pattern. You're just going to continue repeating this over and over and over until your piece measures about 7 inches or about 18 centimeters. So just keep repeating this until you get the measurement that you want, and I'll meet you there. So here I did 11 rounds, And as you see, my piece measures 7 inches or 18 centimeters. And now we are going to begin our decrease. So here we are at the very first 2 stitches. So you're going to single crochet 2 together over the first stitch in the first space. Go ahead and remove your stitch marker from the round below and put it in the stitch you just made. And now we are not going to chain 1. So go ahead and single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and space. Now we have 2 decreases side by side with no chain 1. Now we are going to chain 1. Single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and space. Do not chain 1. Single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and space. Now we have 2 decreases side by side. Chain 1. I'm going to show you one more time. Single crochet 2 together over the next stitch in space. Do it one more time. We have 2 decreases side by side. Now we're going to do our chain 1. So just continue repeating that stitch pattern over and over until you get to the stitch marker. So you want 2 decreases side by side and then a chain 1 separating them. And I'll meet you at the end. So here I am at the end of our first round of decrease. I'm going to show you the last few stitches. So here I decreased once, I'm decreasing twice, and now I'm going to chain 1 before I end this round. So we're going to do another round of decrease. And for the next round, we are going to be single crocheting 3 together. So you are going to decrease over the first 2 stitches in the next space. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the stitch marker. Insert your hook in the first stitch, pull up a loop. Insert your hook in the second stitch, pull up a loop. And enter your hook in the space and pull up a loop. You should have 4 loops on your hook. Now you're going to yarn over and draw through all 4 loops. And chain 1 after you do that. Now go ahead and put your stitch marker back into your very first stitch so you don't lose track of where your round begins and ends. So again, we are going to single crochet 3 together over the next 2 stitches and chain 1 space. Chain 1. One more time I'm going to show you. Single crochet 3 together over the next 2 stitches and chain 1 space. Chain 1. Just continue this stitch pattern all the way till you get to the stitch marker, and I'll meet you there. So here I am at the last 3 stitches. So we are going to single crochet 3 together over the last 2 stitches in the last chain 1 space. Chain 1. Okay, now we are going to do our very last round of decreases. So we are going to single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and space. Do not chain one. Go ahead and remove your stitch marker and put it in the stitch you just made. Now you're going to single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and chain 1 space. Do not chain 1. Single crochet 2 together over the next stitch and space. You are not going to be chaining 1 in this round. Just continue making single crochet 2 together until you reach the stitch marker. So here's what your piece should look like. We are going to go ahead and do an invisible join. So you can remove your stitch marker and watch me carefully as I show you how to make an invisible join. Now you will fasten off, leaving yourself a long tail so that we can close the top of your beanie. Now if you want your hat to be a messy bun hat, go ahead and just weave in your tail and leave this opening so that your hair can come through the top. But for me, I want to close it up. So grab a yarn needle and put your ending tail through the yarn needle. And we are going to be whip stitching through the front loop only. So here's the back loop, here's the front loop, back loop, front loop. So you're going to whip stitch through the front loops only of every stitch in this round. Once you've got your whip stitches made, just cinch the hat shut, and I'm going to take my yarn needle to the inside of the hat to finish it off. So if you're not adding a pom-pom and you really don't want a large hole at the top, you can just continue taking your yarn needle through the bottom stitches and cinch it shut even further. Now you're going to knot your tail to secure it. I'm going to save this tail because I'm actually going to be adding a pom-pom, so I'm going to use that tail later to sew the button on that I attach my pom-pom with. So here's the last step. We are going to be switching down to a 6.5mm hook, or whatever hook you need to. I sized down quite a bit so that I can make a tighter band for the hat. And I'm going to be joining my yarn a couple of stitches over from the beginning of my foundation chain because I want to clean up the knot there. So go ahead and slip stitch to join, and we're going to chain 1, and I'm going to put 1 single crochet in the foundation stitches around. So I began with 44 stitches, right? So I should only have 44 single crochet when I am done with this first round. Now you don't want to crochet too tightly or it might not fit your head. So before you move on to the next round, I highly recommend trying it on for size and making sure that you don't need to adjust your hook size because you don't want this to be uncomfortably small. You just want to kind of clean it up. So just continue making 1 single crochet all the way around. So here are the last 2 stitches of the round, and I wanted to show you how I kind of sort of clean up this beginning foundation area. So I'm going to slip stitch to join in my very first stitch, and then I'm just going to kind of tug on all the tails to close the gap there. And when I go to weave in my tails, I'm going to close that hole right there even further. So the last round we're going to chain 1, and we are going to be working in the back loop only for this last round. So I'm going to make one single crochet in the back loop only in every stitch around. If you desire a wider band, you can make more than this last round, but for me, I just want to keep it simple. So here I am at the very end. I want to make it look nice, so I'm going to use an invisible join. And again, just watch me carefully as I do an invisible join. Now you're going to fasten off and weave in all of your tails. This is what your hat should look like. And because people seem to really like how I add my pom-poms, I'm going to show you right quick how I do that. So I'm going to be using the tail that I left, and I'm going to be using these buttons that I buy from angieandbrit.com with the care instructions that are engraved on the button itself. Now this yarn is super thick, and it's too thick really to go through the buttonholes. So I'm actually going to separate the strands into 2 strands so that it will go a little more easily into my buttonholes. Now thread 1 strand through your yarn needle and sew the button to the underside of the hat. Now I'm just going to tie these tails together in knots several times to secure the button. You have to be very gentle since you separated the strand of yarn because it's very breakable. So just gently tie it in a knot. Now just cut your strands. And here's the pom-pom that I desire to use. I have hot glued a piece of ribbon to the elastic of this pom-pom. And the reason that I do it is so that it is a tag and it's easier to remove. So you're just going to put it through the top, just wherever you can find a hole to put it through. And then pull it to the other side as tight as you can because you don't want your pom-pom to be flopping all over the place. And then you're just going to secure the elastic to the button as many times as it'll go. And now your customer or the wearer, whoever gets it, will have a tag to remove the elastic so that they can remove the pom-pom later. And this is what your hat should look like. You are done. Weave in your tails, add a tag, however you want. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial today. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching.